Screen sharing will be for tab, which tab, window, yeah, this window. And here we have knight versus two pawns arena. I will keep this open and okay, WhatsApp will also remain open. Chess, study, my studies, endgame studies. Here we go. So, is it visible? That's मतलब, if it consists of a lot of blunders, it's okay, bro, because you all are in the learning stage. मतलब, we all, we all are in the learning stage, and we also make mistakes. So it's not a big deal. We will try to break that down, and I will try to answer the reason of why it should be not made. Then I think you can correlate with why question every time in the next set of games you will play. In the same situation, you will ask yourself, why am I playing the move? And then hopefully you can get the answer. So, okay. So let's start. Discussion will be based on this position. As usual, h3 g2, f3 e4, c3 b4. b4 is the new entry for today, and the king is on f2 for white. Okay, so how many pawns? uh Okay, so there are four on the king side, two on the queen side. So total in total six pawns, and black also has h6, g7, f7, and e6. Four pawns on the king side, knight extra, king on f8. As usual, our strategy is to block these pawns with the help of both knight as well as king. What we have to do is we need to bring this king closer to queen side as soon as possible, and there from thereafter we have to reroute the knight to various positions. I mean, what we have to do is, ideally, let's say this pawn moves from here. Okay, annotate, yeah. If this pawn moves to somewhere like c5, and then this pawn goes to b6, then the king should be able to cover this e7, d7, c6. Let me show it the board. For example, this pawn somehow goes here and goes here. So four moves. So king will be able to come in three moves. That's the main motive. Let's see how we can achieve this practically. So first move for black. What do you suggest to play as first move for black here? What do you suggest black should play on the first up? King e7 and then e5 for white. Okay. Any other move? Any other move? Guys, please answer fast. Any other move you want to consider? nc4. Okay, nc4 is also a good move. But nc4 kind of goes too far in, you know, getting allowing the king to move. But okay, it's also a great move. Okay. So what I thought is, I thought to play knight b5 here. King e7, good move. As you pointed out, e5 comes. But then we have knight c4, f4, and king d7, king to e2, c6, d3, and d5. Okay, b5 is not possible because knight is protecting the b6, so there is no progress at all. And if b5 comes, we go king c5 here. Okay, that's the main motive. What we do is king e7, good move. It's actually a very good move. And knight b5, why I prefer this, because it directly attacks c3. And in time pressure, If your opponent somehow makes a pre-move, let's say king e3 here, I mean, pre-move you know, right? As soon as you make the move, then your opponent will just immediately make this move. So king e3, then knight c3 is possible. That's why. But okay, it's completely good for white to play c4 here. Then you can play knight d4, king e3, king e3. Now, the point of knight b5 actually was to entice c4 so that he could play knight d4. Okay, here the correct move for white is to play b5. But your friend might think, your opponent might think that I'm getting to attack this knight. But no, we have actually, let's put knight d4 as a exclamation mark because it's a good move and it actually tempts white to more often than not play king e3. Okay, and this is a big blunder because it drops the pawn on b2. That's the that's the main motive. Are you able to understand the main motto of knight b5? Knight b5 attacks c3 on the first step, but more importantly, it aims to go d4, enticing the white king to go to e3 to attack this knight on d4. So that if that happens, which often happens at the amateur level or the below 1200, 1300, or even 1500 level in time pressure, then knight c2 is a no brainer. Okay, so I think you understood it. Yeah. So now knight b5, c4, knight d4. Let me promote this line. Okay, this is possible, and the point is now if this knight d4 is played, as I said, best move is to play b5. Okay, I will promote this as well. King e3, knight takes c3. This is one variation, and king e3. This time when knight is on d4 is always a blunder because of knight c2. Now the correct move for white is to play b5. As usual, now we have to advance the king, king e7, and king e3. Now knight b3. Now knight b3 prevents the c5 pawn from roaming, but you can say b6, king d7, b7, and king c7. King is in time to stop the pawn. In last 2 3 classes, I have been discussing of the square rule. If you remember, when it's white to move, then you have to measure this how many squares are being covered. Basically, what the rule says is white has to cover 3 squares. Okay, and point is if white has to cover 3 squares to promotion and it is his move and he makes one move and the square gets reduced. Okay, now white only has to make two moves, and black, how to measure how will black stop this pawn? That's the measurement I'm saying. Point is white is on b6, white pawn, and he wants to go b7 and then b8 queen. And if you construct a square around this 3 by 3 square around this pawn, then you have to see if it is black to move, is the king able to go to any of the squares in this area which is controlled by the pawn? If yes, then the pawn can be stopped. And as you see, this square, king comes into the square right in the time, and after b7, king c7, pawn is not able to promote. Okay, that's knight d4. It's not too difficult to imagine because then b5 you have a simple aim of going here, and once he plays king e3 you play knight b3 and relax. King d3 is simply a wastage of time, you can just move up the board, and once he goes king c3 you can go knight c5 here. Okay, because knight c5 is safeguarded by the king, and then b6, no further progress, c5 cannot move, and b6 will be very much intact. I will show you some more detail in this. For example, he moves b6, then you have knight b7, and even if he moves king b4, you can move king c6. There is no c5 here. Remember that because knight takes c5 is coming. For example, if he goes by mistake, then you can just capture this. No b7, knight will again capture this pawn. So white is kind of struck here, and he goes e5, f6, f4. Now it's good idea to take this. Why? Because you see this e6 pawn, even though appears weak, but it is not weak. Okay. Or a better move could also be to, if he goes e5 in this position, I mean instead of this. If he goes e5, then you can directly take this pawn as well. You may be wondering that why I did not tell that. I mean, it was possible, just an oversight from my side. But hello, anything, anyone? Okay. Sorry. Just before e5, you can directly take this. I will promote. I will delete this issue. Okay. e5, king takes b6 is possible. And now, if you see the eval bar, knight is up. I mean, we are up by 2 pawns now, and we are just remaining with capturing this pawn, and it will also soon get vanished away from the board. Hence, white will lose this. Okay. I hope you understood it. And any questions, or else we will go to next line. Okay. Any questions? Just put it in the chat or raise your hands. I will wait for 30 seconds. Okay. So I described knight b5 here. Okay. Let's look at this king e7 line. It's also equally good. Point is you cannot go c4 because knight is capturing. I mean knight is controlling the square on c4. So white goes king e3. We go king d7, king d4, and king to c6. Now e5 is an adventurous try, and I prefer to go here knight b5 check again, attacking this c3 as well as king on d4. He can go either c4 or he can go d3. Whichever way, it's going to be uh, kind of winning for white. Okay, I'm sorry, winning for black. So let's look at first alternative, king c4. Now in this, our job as black pieces make has been made quite easier. What we have to do is we have to go knight c7 and put this knight on d5. This d5 square is referred to as outpost. What is an outpost? Outpost is a situation where a knight, if placed in a square in the center of the board, is not opposed by the pawns of enemy pawns actually. I mean the pawns of enemy king or enemy pieces. Okay. What I'm trying to say is if you go knight c7, then you have this knight d5. And this knight d5, this d5 square is in the center of the board, and it is unopposed by the opposition pieces or in particular pawns by now. Point is, why I'm saying unopposed, because you may say that this pawn on c3 can attack anytime. The problem is this b4 can also get attacked, and this g2 is also under vulnerability. That's why. So we are aiming to go knight here. White has to make something. He goes g3. We have to go knight d5 as usual. d5 check, king b6. We were waiting for this mistake only because then we can just reroute the knight back to c7 and take this. For example, he goes king b3 here. Okay. Now we can take this easy. But taking this is a blunder. I will just mark it as blunder. Why? Because it allows c4 check. So white has managed to trick you somehow by offering his pawn for free. Don't take the free gift. Go king c5 here. And now c4 can be met by knight b6. Now we are ready to accept this free gift. The point is, you have to keep the king either horizontally or vertically adjacent to the knight, not diagonally. Because diagonally, the knight will be susceptible to checks from the opposition pawn. So just remember this structure. I will just make one random move. Remember this structure. King and knight are adjacent neighbors, not diagonal neighbors. Okay. I will just comment out for you. King and knight are adjacent neighbors and not diagonal neighbors. Not diagonal neighbors. Spelling correct. So, did you understand it, guys? If yes, we will just, uh, I mean, finish this game fully until we finish off with the checkmate, and then we will move on to today's arena games. Why? Because more and more games will help to explain us better that what could have been done efficiently. Because from the starting, you may not know the entire technique, but let's see if somehow we can regenerate our technique as well from the arena games. So let me just finish this game. Here, knight c4, and then king to d3, knight e5 check. Pawn on e5 is also falling. I will just mark it everywhere where the pawn is falling. Okay. So knight takes e5 check, king e4. Now king attacks the knight. So knight can move here to c4, and then black king tries to go inside. You should not allow this. Go king b5, and then king g4, king c5, king f4, king d5. Black is just White is just hopelessly wandering around the position in hope for something fruitful. Okay, so let us not allow an inch to do so for them. So king g4. Let's go king e5 here. f4 check, and king e4, not allowing the king to go for any backward moves. I mean, he should not. The aim is he should not escape this Chakravyuh. Okay, he should not escape this trap which have been led by us very carefully. Okay, ideal setup would be to go for g6 and then to h5 and somehow bring this knight to f3 for a beautiful checkmate. Okay, let's try to achieve this. So it's white to move. Let's say he goes king h4. Now we place the knight to d2 and it is ready to go for f3, but not now. King g4 and g6, a very careful move. King h4 and now f6. Okay, why f6? Because if we play h5 here now, then the king will come to g5 and then to f6 or h6, thus escaping a trap. So it's not possible to think this, but if you reduce the space considerably, then you can think of very quickly about this. f6, king g4, h5, king f4, and knight f3 is checkmate. How was this checkmate, guys? Will you be able to follow this checkmate pattern, or is the queen, I mean, promoting the pawn to a queen more comfortable? I mean, don't try to go for something which you feel that is difficult. But this concept of checkmate, I mean, this knight swindling checkmate is very, very useful when we have middle game. So far, we are just focusing on the end game. But in chess generally, middle game are the we will cover this up. But then the point is you can just go on and reduce the space forever. Okay, I will just cover it in the next position. Okay, the middle game requires precision, and with precision we need to have a lot of restrictive moves from our side for the opponent so that we could wrap up the game quickly. That's why I'm just trying to explain this knight checkmate instead of going for the long drawn queen and then promoting the pawns and then queening and checkmating. It takes a lot of time. That's why. Okay. Now Pranav bro asked that what if we move h4 here? That's right. I think I understood correctly. So here you go g6, and if he comes h5, go knight e3 check. Okay, and then king h3. It's easy pawn, or just go king f3. Both are equally good. And once you go, if he goes g4, you have to drop this, and there is no way out actually. King takes g4, king g1, and king g3. Again, you have to go inside, and now you can just calmly wait with something like g5, king g1, f5, and this pawn is coming for the king's head. Okay, it's like I am pre-moving now. Okay, f2 is check a stalemate, so be careful not to go for this. It's a blunder, and I will comment it out, stalemate. While pre-moving, the stalemate occurs quite often. So just try to give as much checks as possible while you are in time constraint. So king h1, just go g4 here as a waiting move. Okay, I will promote this. Not okay. This is delete, and g4 is the correct move, and it deserves an exclamation under time situation. Sorry, it's good move. And here, if you go f2, then it's a horrible mistake, which is a game drawing blunder. From a game winning position, we have drawn this. It's a statement. Okay, so g4, king g1, and now f2, followed by either queen or even rook also works. Both of them are check and mate. Okay, so this is the way we have to do it if there is a pawn, but it's a lot simpler, and he might your opponent might try to finish the game quickly as well, or may not know the correct prolonging technique. So in that case, knight f3 checkmate was useful. I hope you understood it. Any questions? Okay. So let's cover today's games now. Knight versus two pawns arena. And if I see the statistics, white has won 48% of the games in spite of being so much materially down. And black is has won only 33%. Draw rate is 19%. So okay. Which game do you want me to cover today? If you want me to cover today, I mean, we will just go a quick recap for every game. Just send me three of them. Just send the link of any game which you want to go forward. Three games are enough. It will be covered in 10 minutes. Send me fast, guys. Any game which you want to cover me. Anybody wants to send me anything? Okay. One game has been received here, and meanwhile, others please post it. And while we finish discussing this, we will visit your next game. So this is the first game. I mean, I have been sent here. It's by it's Pranav versus Shrujal, and Shrujal is white. Pranav is black. So Pranav has played e5, perfectly good move, very good move in fact, because it restricts f4 and d4. Both the entries are being sealed off right away. Okay, and since there are no uh, passing paths for both these pawns because they are controlled by the knight, it it is a good move according to the situation, and we can move forward. So king e3, again a very logical move. King e7, king d3, and f6. It's skeptical, but f6 is fine. Very good move. c4, very logical. King e6, it's a waste move. It's a waste move because what I said was we have to just always aim to bring the king to the queen side to stop both these pawns, because then the knight will be free to capture them with interest, and slowly and steadily all these two pawns as well as the other pieces will get wiped off. Okay, so king e6 was a mistake. Then king c3 was played. It's not a bad move either, but it's not very good as well. Correct move would have been to go for b5 or even c5. c5 actually attacks this knight and forces it to go somewhere like c8. Then king c4 followed by b5. It will be very unpleasant for black. b5, king c7. Now we are still in time to stop these pawns, and it should be winning for white or for black. But the problem is you have allowed king d5 unnecessarily by playing king e6 for no reason. That's the only. Even in end games, remember this thing. Even a mistake of one move or a slight mistake of one move can be detrimental and can make the position tricky. I'm not saying you would lose it, but it can make the position trickier than what it was in the earlier attempt. So let's move forward. King c3 was the last move that was played. Ronaldo played knight b7. Okay, c5, king d7, and king c6. Now b5, king d7, and c6. Wow! I said, guys, in the last concluding, in the last concluding thing that king and knight should never be in diagonals. Otherwise, they will be four, and that's what happened. And I also said that king has to be the neighbor, horizontal neighbor or vertical neighbor of the knight. Remember this, Pranav bro. King should always be the vertical or the horizontal member and not the diagonal neighbor of the knight. Here you played it diagonally. That's why c6 came, and then you have to play king c7 and king d5. It was a huge blunder because you were having this knight for free and it was up for grabs. But okay, you didn't play it possibly, but you had 26 seconds, bro. Why didn't you play uh, c takes b7 here? You had 26 seconds, and 26. I mean, it should have been enough. Like in 5 seconds, you should have realized that this knight is going away. Any particular reason? Okay, you misclicked. Fine, that happens. So king d5, knight d8, king c5, now g5. A counterplay on king side. Okay, but I think This might be a good position to win for white. b6 check, correctly played. King c8. Again the same mistake. Diagonal neighbors should not be allowed. And here c7 was the winning move, but you didn't play it. Okay. So king b8 was not played. King c8 now being corrected. And here king d6. Again king b8. This was more fatal actually, because in this case you are at least getting back the two pawns, but here after king d6 and king b8 you are not getting anything, and this is already I think winning for white. Yeah, you can see the eval bar, it's showing plus 6 point plus 8.5, so it's kind of equivalent to up by a queen. That's why. And you have allowed this king to march two forward, and your king has gone backwards as well. So at this point here it's showing 0 0, and till here. Okay, on this point king d5 knight d8 was the best move, but it's still a 0 0, and since you have allowed so much of king activity, that's why it is like a draw for now. Okay, and at this point I think white should have won this quite easily. c7 was played, king c8, and b7. Oh, again b7 was a mistake. Why didn't you take this and promote it to a queen? And then b7, your pawn was unstoppable, and it's checkmate on the next move as well. I mean, if you play king d8, it's not checkmate, but you can actually try to make a queen here, and then play something like queen d8, king g7, and queen e8, king h7. Okay, and then queen f8, creating a illusionary check stalemate kind of position. But king g6 and king e6, following king h7, king h5 is the only move where queen f7 check, king h4, and king f5, h5, and black is out of steam here. He has to play king g3, then queen takes h5. I think I made a mistake here. Just wait a second. Here we have played king f7. So let's play queen d8, king g7, and queen e8. This is fine. And now king h7, bring the king closer and try to go to king f5, king h7, king takes f6, and there are no king moves here. So this should be a checkmate, not a checkmate yet, and this is a checkmate. Queen g7 finishes off the game completely. I just showed you the finish line, but you were completely winning this for two times. So knight takes b7. This makes the matters worse. Knight f5 check, king b6, knight c4, and king a6. Now you are giving up the pawn for free. Thereafter king b5 and king c5, king d7, b4, and now it's a cakewalk for black to win this. Let's see how he finishes it. And this is a clinical finish. Yeah, I think this should be more than enough for now. Any other games you want to send, guys? The points were, just one sec. The point is, you allowed this king to march with c5 when knight b7 was a passive move, because you should have waited for this pawn to move forward so that you could go to knight b5. You know, you should not move the knight until or unless it is provoked to do so. Because if you move the knight unnecessarily to a passive square, then the chances of you winning the game efficiently goes away, and it may backfire on you as well. Because in this game itself, you can see that you have allowed unnecessary counterplay for white by allowing him to go c5, b5, king to c4, and then to d5. unnecessary counterplay for your opponent, and in this endgame will lead to a very bad consequence. Okay, so let's cover the next game. Okay. Oh, so just one sec. Yeah. This is another game where black has won. So let's say how he has played. Knight b5, excellent move. Knight a3. Okay, you didn't follow that rule, but fine. c5, knight b5. Now see, this is okay. And why are you moving the knight unnecessarily? Just bring the king now. Play king e7. Restrict your opponent, bro. Because king c4 and king c6, your king is right back in the game, and thereafter there are absolutely nothing as counterplay which can be played by white here. So point moving the knight unnecessarily without any consequence was a mistake. And e5 again a very bad move because it allowed knight c6 forking this e5 and b4 at the same time. Sensible move would be to play b5 and then this pawn drops, and then b6. For example, you can play just knight c6 and not knight to d7. Be careful. You can play knight d7 expecting a fork this, but the point is he goes c6 and knight b6. You survive this, but somehow if king comes to d4, e7, c5, then you have to play knight c8 and something like king here and here. It just allows you to make the draw on a bareful basis, but then knight c6 completely cuts off the king from going to d4 here. Okay, so this can be a follow up. E5 was a terrible blunder. King e7, inaccuracy, because better move was obviously knight c6. And then king e4, f6, f4, g5, g. Okay, you are followed quite a bit, and then you have later caught up. So well done, Balaji bro. You have at least later caught up with the wind and tried to go to queen side to stop these pawns. So you have partially implemented this idea, but it's a good initiative and good start. Knight b5, knight c7, knight a6. Great maneuvering. I understood that c5 was also on the pin. So knight takes and then king b5. I mean, this is kind of clinical. Really great finish. And here you misplayed, but doesn't matter for now if you know the king endgame. King e6, king d6, d5. I think you made the game a bit competitive, but yeah, I think apart from this night hanging here, others were pretty much fine, and you were having kind of 13 seconds. But okay, you have implemented this king going forward, and then knight going to b5, c7, a6, and c5. This is a great maneuvering which we have done, and without the guidance, if you have completed this, even though with a much greater moves, I think you should be proud of yourself. And you can be confident that you can win this endgame tomorrow when you play in the tournament. So I think it's a wrap now. Any other game? Just one game can be also covered, or we can just wrap it up for today. I hope you understand these end games pretty well. And if you have any questions, please ask now. Tournament is 10 to 11 tomorrow. I will just announce about the tournament 1 minute. But if you have any question from this, please ask everybody, those who are in the meet. Any questions? Any questions? Please raise your hand or put it in the chat, or if not, then put a thumbs up. Okay. Okay, fine. So let me stop the recording first. And just